The wagon wheels had stopped turning an hour ago, but Clara's tears hadn't. She pressed her face against the splintered wood, watching the dust settle where her family's caravan had disappeared into the horizon. They'd left her at the crossroads with nothing but a canvas sack and a promise that someone would come back for her. But the sun was already climbing toward noon, and the desert stretched endlessly in every direction. "Please don't leave me here," she had wept, clinging to her father's coat as he pried her fingers loose. The words still burned in her throat, like swallowed sand. Now she sat alone on a weathered stump beside the old trading post, its broken sign creaking in the wind. The building had been abandoned for years, its windows boarded up, roof caving in. This wasn't a place where people came back for anyone. A horse's hooves drummed against the hardpan, growing louder. Clara looked up, hope fluttering in her chest like a trapped bird. But it wasn't her family returning. A lone rider approached, his hat pulled low, leather chaps dust-covered from long miles. His horse was lathered with sweat, and something about the way he sat in the saddle, alert, wary, suggested he was running from something. The cowboy reined in beside the trading post, his pale eyes taking in the scene, the abandoned building, the girl with tears still wet on her cheeks, the single set of wagon tracks leading east. He didn't dismount. Men in his line of work learned not to get involved in other people's troubles. "You waiting for someone?" His voice was rough as gravel, but not unkind. Clara wiped her nose on her sleeve. "My papa said they'd come back." The cowboy's gaze followed the wagon tracks until they vanished into heat shimmer. He'd seen enough abandoned children in frontier towns to recognize the lie. Families didn't leave their own unless they had no choice, or unless keeping them meant everyone would die. "How long you been sitting here?" "Since dawn." He checked the sun's position and frowned. Dawn was 6 hours gone. His horse shifted restlessly beneath him, ears pricked toward the southern ridge, where riders had been following his trail for 2 days. He needed to keep moving. Getting involved would only slow him down, and slow meant dead. But when Clara looked up at him with those desperate brown eyes, something in his chest tightened like a rope around a calf's neck. The cowboy dismounted despite every instinct screaming at him to ride on. His name was Jack Reardon, though he'd been using different names for the better part of 3 months. The men hunting him wouldn't care about a little girl, but they'd remember anyone who helped him. "What's your name?" he asked, kneeling beside Clara's stump. "Clara Hutchins. My family's heading to California, gold country." She said it like repeating a prayer she no longer believed in. Jack knew the Hutchins name from wanted posters. Clara's father had robbed a bank in Tucson, killed a guard in the process. The whole family had been running ever since, and now they'd dumped the slowest member to save themselves. It was cold arithmetic, the kind that kept people alive in hard country. "They ain't coming back, Clara." Her face crumpled, but she didn't cry again. He respected that. Jack studied the trading post. Its walls were solid adobe, built to withstand Apache raids. There was a well out back. He could hear water when he dropped a pebble down. It wasn't the worst place to leave a child, if you had to leave one at all. But leaving her here was the same as putting a bullet in her head. Slower maybe, but just as final. "I can't take you with me," he said, more to himself than to her. "Men are coming who'd hurt you just to get to me." Clara's small hand touched his wrist. "I won't slow you down. I can ride. Papa taught me." The sound of distant hooves made them both freeze. Jack counted at least 4 riders, maybe 5, coming hard from the south. His pursuers had found his trail again. He had maybe 10 minutes before they crested the ridge and spotted the trading post. Every practical bone in his body said to mount up and ride. Clara would die, but she was going to die anyway. At least this way he'd live to see another sunset. But when he looked at her face, dirt-streaked and brave despite everything, he saw his sister Mary at that age. Mary who'd died of fever because there hadn't been money for a doctor. Mary who'd trusted him to keep her safe and died anyway. Jack made his choice. "Can you hold on tight and keep quiet?" Clara nodded, hope blooming in her eyes like desert flowers after rain. "Then we ride." Jack swung Clara up behind his saddle and spurred his horse toward the rocky hills north of the trading post. The animal was already tired, but fear gave it fresh strength. Behind them, dust plumes marked their pursuers' approach like smoke signals announcing death. "Keep your head down, and don't let go," Jack called over the thunder of hooves. Clara pressed her face against his back, her thin arms locked around his waist. She weighed maybe 70 pounds, but on an exhausted horse, every ounce mattered. Jack could feel his mount's stride shortening with each mile, lungs working like a bellows. The riders behind them had crested the ridge now, black shapes against the blazing sky. Jack recognized the lead horse, a big roan gelding belonging to Marshal Tom Kellerman. Kellerman was honest but relentless, the kind of lawman who'd chase a man to Hell's Gates if the law demanded it. Beside him rode Deputy Santos and 3 bounty hunters who cared more about the reward money than bringing anyone back alive. The hills offered some cover, but Jack's horse was failing fast. Foam streaked its neck, and he could hear the labored breathing. They had maybe another mile before the animal collapsed entirely. There, Clara pointed to a narrow canyon, cutting between 2 mesas. "Papa hid our wagon in places like that when the Apache were hunting." Jack veered toward the canyon, praying it wasn't a dead end. The entrance was barely wide enough for a horse and rider, hidden behind a screen of ocotillo and barrel cactus. Inside, the walls rose 60 feet on either side, carved smooth by centuries of flash floods. The canyon floor was soft sand that would muffle hoofbeats. Jack pushed his horse deeper into the shadows, following the winding passage until it opened into a hidden pocket of stone. Ancient petroglyphs covered the walls, spirals and hunting scenes left by people who'd understood the value of good hiding places. Jack dismounted and pressed his ear to the canyon wall. The sound of pursuit had faded, but not disappeared. Kellerman wasn't stupid. He'd find the entrance eventually. "We can't stay here long," Jack whispered. The crack of a rifle shot echoed off the canyon walls, followed by a man's voice. "Jack Rarest, we know you're in there. Come out with your hands up, and the girl doesn't get hurt." Clara's grip on his arm tightened. "They found us." Jack checked his Colt, 4 bullets left. Against 5 men in open ground, it might as well be empty. "Send out the girl, Rarest," Kellerman's voice again. "This doesn't have to involve her." But Jack knew better. Clara was a witness now, and dead witnesses never testified. In the silence that followed Kellerman's ultimatum, Clara reached into her canvas sack and pulled out a small wooden horse, carved with careful detail. Its paint was worn smooth by countless small hands. "My brother Tommy made this for me," she whispered, holding it out to Jack. "Before the fever took him, Papa said I had to leave it behind, but I couldn't. It's all I got left of him." Jack stared at the tiny horse, remembering his own brother's whittling knife and the animals he'd carved from cottonwood bark. How many children had he known who carried such treasures, small anchors to people they'd lost? "Tommy would want you to keep it," Jack said softly. Clara shook her head. "He'd want me to give it to someone who'd remember him, someone who might live to tell his story." She pressed the horse into Jack's palm. "You take it, please." The wood was warm from her touch, smooth as river stone. Jack felt something break open in his chest, a wall he'd built around his heart after Mary died. For 3 years he'd told himself that caring about people only brought pain. Better to stay alone, stay moving, stay numb. But this little girl had just handed him the most precious thing she owned, trusting him with her brother's memory. The gesture was so pure, so brave, that it made his throat tight. "Clara," he began, but she cut him off. "My real name's not Clara, it's Elizabeth. Elizabeth Mary Hutchins." She smiled through her fear. "But Papa said Clara sounded less fancy, less memorable." "Mary." "Of course it was Mary. Elizabeth's a fine name," Jack said. "A strong name." "Rarest," Kellerman called again. "Time's up." Jack heard the sound of men moving, boots scraping on stone. They were coming into the canyon, probably splitting up to cover both sides. In minutes this hiding place would become a killing ground. But looking at Clara, Elizabeth, he realized he wasn't the same man who'd ridden up to that trading post. The scared, angry drifter who'd spent 3 years running from his past had died somewhere in the desert. In his place stood someone who remembered what it meant to protect something precious. "Elizabeth," he said, "I need you to promise me something." She nodded solemnly. Whatever happens next, you hold on to that hope. You hold on to Tommy's memory, and you remember that someone thought you were worth saving. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed off the canyon walls. Jack stepped out of the hidden alcove with his hands raised, the carved horse tucked safely in his shirt pocket. Kellerman and his men had their guns drawn, spread across the canyon floor like wolves circling prey. "Where's the girl, Rarest?" "Safe," Jack said simply. "This is between us." But even as he spoke, Elizabeth emerged from behind him, her small chin raised in defiance. "I'm right here." Kellerman's weathered face softened slightly at the sight of her. "Child, you don't need to be part of this. Your daddy's crimes aren't yours to carry." "Neither are his," Elizabeth said, pointing at Jack. "He could have left me to die. Instead he risked everything to save me. That makes him better than any of you." The words hit Kellerman like physical blows. Jack saw doubt flicker in the marshal's eyes, saw him holster his weapon, while his deputies kept theirs drawn. "What'd you do, Rarest?" Kellerman asked quietly. "The warrant says murder, but I've known killers. You don't carry yourself like one." For the first time in 3 years, Jack told the truth. "I shot a man who was beating his wife to death. Turned out he was the mayor's son. Self-defense doesn't matter much when you're poor and the victim's rich." Kellerman studied him for a long moment, then looked at Elizabeth. Something passed between the marshal and the girl, an understanding that transcended law books and wanted posters. "Funny thing about canyon echoes," Kellerman said finally. "Sometimes you think you hear voices, but when you get closer there's nobody there, just wind and shadows." He turned to his men. "Mount up." Rarest's trail went cold. "We're heading back." The deputies looked confused, but they didn't argue. Bounty hunters knew better than to question a marshal's decisions in his own territory. As the lawman filed out of the canyon, Kellerman paused beside Jack. "There's a homestead about 50 miles north. Widow woman named Sarah Chen needs help with her ranch. She doesn't ask questions about a man's past, only judges him by his work." He glanced at Elizabeth. "She's partial to children too. Lost her own to scarlet fever." After they'd gone, Jack and Elizabeth sat in the silence of the ancient canyon, surrounded by petroglyphs of hunters and families carved in stone. The little wooden horse rested between them, a bridge between past and future. "You reckon we'll like this Sarah Chen?" Elizabeth asked. Jack smiled, the first real smile he'd worn in years. "I reckon she'll like us just fine." Years later, when Elizabeth Mary Chen graduated from the territorial school she'd helped her adoptive mother build, she would remember the day a cowboy turned back at a crossroads and changed both their fates. The carved horse sat on the mantel of their ranch house, a reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of courage echo the longest through time. But that day in the canyon, she was simply a girl who'd found a father, and he was a man who'd remembered how to hope. They rode north together toward their new beginning,